us now on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline via Zoom is National College Football insider and reporter for The Athletic. His name is Chris Vannini. Chris, great to have you back on BYU Sports Nation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Now we got some real football stuff to talk about.
Holy cow. And we're hoping that BYU has an actual football schedule to play against. But here we are wondering what the Cougars are going to do. We'll get to that in just a moment, but I want to start here, Chris. Your Twitter bio says that you are a Taysom Hill type. That resonates with BYU fans, so please expound on what you mean there.
It means I'm versatile. It means I can play multiple positions, and you put me where you need me, and I can make a play somewhere.
Physically, is there a comp there? Or?
I don't think I'm good enough to play in the NFL, so probably not in that sense.
Taysom Hill, perhaps the greatest athlete in BYU history. He was amazing. Okay, let's get to the news. So obviously the ACC says, okay, conference only +1. They want to preserve some of those SEC rivalries and whatnot, right? And then the ACC, rumors of a conference only, +1, and so on and so forth. So what's your reaction to the news that's coming out as more dominoes fall as we get closer to knowing what schedules are going to be played?
I think my biggest takeaway from the ACC news yesterday was that nobody knows what anybody else is doing, and the communication is very poor. Even coming out of Tuesday's AD meeting, there were people who didn't think the ACC would make a decision. Obviously, the SEC didn't quite know this was coming. There had been talk about the schedule alliance. The +1 puts pressure on them now. You know, a couple of weeks ago, the Big Ten surprised everybody with their moves. So it just kind of highlights that everybody's really just working on their own here. You've got different start dates for each conference depending on what you do. So I think it's a good plan by the ACC. I think it was probably the best plan they could probably go forward with, especially getting Notre Dame, and there was obviously a big get for them. But it just feels like round and round we go. Every day someone else is doing something different.
And speaking of someone else and potentially doing something different, now the question turns to, what is the SEC? The good old boys in the Southeastern Conference, Alabama and Tennessee's and Florida's and Georgia's and all of these historic programs. What do you think they're going to do, Chris, in light of what the ACC announced yesterday?
Well, the presidents meet today. There's a decent chance they could make a decision today. It's always possible they don't. But, yeah, the ACC decision puts a lot of pressure on them. There are those interconference rivalry games, your South Carolina Clemson's, your Georgia Techs. Those matter to a lot of people in those states. And if the SEC decides to do conference only, and the SEC is the reason that those games don't happen, you're going to have a lot of local politicians that are mad. They've already spoken up on some of this stuff before. So it was really a shrewd move by the ACC. Obviously, you know, I'm sure the SEC would have liked some communication on that before they figured out what everybody was doing. But we'll see. We'll see what the SEC does today. It's probably either conference only or a +1. But as with all these things, they seem to change by the day.
The ACC made a massive power move in saying, okay, we're going to do a +1 non-conference game, but it's got to be a home game. So the ACC team is saying they've got to host the SEC team in that rivalry, right? That's a power move from the ACC.
Yeah, and the ACC already is scheduled to host a number of those SEC rivalry games already this year. I'm sure that was one reason that they were okay with doing that right now. It's an easier decision for them when they have the game at home, when they have the game on their TV inventory. But yeah, it does play into it. It does, but it does open the door for the in-state games, because South Carolina, Clemson, that's in the same state no matter what. Georgia Tech, Florida State, those games are in the same state no matter what. So I think they can work around it, but it certainly was easier for the ACC to make this call.
Do you feel like the Pac-12 and Big Ten jumped the gun in that regard? Because at least in the Pac-12, for us, we're saying, why can't BYU and Utah play? It's literally a 45-minute drive. Right now, maybe an hour with traffic. But Utah flying to LA makes no sense compared to playing BYU. Did the ACC perhaps learn a little bit in, well, we want to preserve some non-conference rivalries, or maybe they just have more in that area of the country?
I mean, I'm sure it played a role, but the biggest thing in terms of the Big Ten and the Pac-12 doing what they did was safety was a factor, but the biggest factor was schedule flexibility, being able to work with teams you work with as a group on all sorts of types of issues, people who are already on the same page. You can change games if you need to. You can replace opponents if you need to. They all work together as a group already. Flexibility was a big part of this because there's a lot of, a game against a group of 5 team or a BYU gets canceled. And it's like, hey, we're just right down the road. We're doing the same testing. Why can't we do that? And yeah, the ACC is keeping the door open for that types of things. But the Big Ten felt, coming off of the Ivy League news a few days prior, that someone needed to make a decision, because had the Big Ten not done that, or the Pac-12, who knows where we'd be now, because, obviously everybody's just kind of waiting and hoping we get to fall camp, hoping we get to the season, and the wheels needed to start turning.
Chris Vannini, college football insider and writer for The Athletic, with us on BYU Sports Nation. The Cougars, as you well know, Chris, said goodbye to 3 games with the Pac-12 and 2 with the Big Ten, and are now kind of almost preparing to hear that they won't play Missouri or have that possibility of Alabama in week 1. So BYU fans are kind of scrambling, but then they look at Notre Dame and the ACC and say, well, isn't there a conference that would welcome BYU and do this? If BYU offered up their ESPN money and somehow they could come to some type of collaborative effort, is there a conference that would best fit BYU's scenario, that it could be a mutually beneficial situation for the conference and BYU?
I can't say I'm aware if any of that is happening up front, but the place that would make the most sense would obviously be the Mountain West, because of the previous ties there, because of the location, because of the TV money. Notre Dame's TV money, it's not quite conference level money, but it's still big money. That was the big factor that the ACC needed to work out in bringing them in. Notre Dame also already plays 5 ACC games a year, so it's not as big of a jump compared to what BYU going into another conference should be. The independents outside of Notre Dame are in a really tough spot. I think it could make sense if the Mountain West and BYU decided to do that. Obviously there's a lot of different machinations that need to go on for that to happen, but just hypothetically, if I'm BYU, that feels like that might be the safest bet if you can do that. But you've got game contracts you got to figure out already. There's a whole host of issues. It's a very complicated thing if that were to happen.
Let's talk about the Big 12, because they're an interesting one that has said a little bit, in terms of reports leaked or rumors and whatnot. But they're unique in that they only have the 10 teams. So how do you see that potentially shaking out?
Yeah, I mean, the Big 12, the ACC pushed things back a week. The Pac-12 pushed things back to late September. The Big 12 is going the other way. They've scheduled some week 0 games. Kansas added Southern Illinois, or I think they may have moved that. Oklahoma moved its Missouri State game up. There has been talk about TCU, UNLV, but that's not official. We don't know if that's actually happening yet. So, the Big 12, they only have 10 teams. They only play 9 conference games. They may try to keep some of those group of 5 games that they already have on the schedule, or FCS games. And they're one we're still not sure about. They appear to be the last Power 5 league that's going to make a decision.
Chris, you mentioned that the communication has been porous, and that's probably putting it lightly between all of these Power 5 conferences. And it's easy to point that there's no really central governing figure for Power 5 college football. So in your educated, tenured writer opinion, what does college football need to try and make the communication better and organize this?
It's hard to say. A lot of people say there should be a football czar to be in control of things, but there are so many competing interests within the sport of college football, within the Power 5, within the Power 5 conferences themselves, that nobody can ever come to a unanimous agreement on things. And that's just kind of the way it is. College football has always been a regional sport with regional priorities and trying to figure it out from there. It's easy to say, hey, everybody wants to do this. Hey, hey, Mac Brown would be a great guy to do it one day or something like that. But as some people have mentioned, as he mentioned it the other day, but everybody's going to have accusations of bias toward one thing. You need to have everybody come to an agreement on. The NCAA is not an organization. It's a collection of the schools. There's obviously a lot of bureaucracy, committees, different presidents, ADs on different things. It's very convoluted, but that's kind of the only way you can do it when you have 300 teams in Division I alone, not to mention D2 and D3. It's not like pro sports where you have 30 teams and they're all businesses and everybody gets paid and you can just have a players union and you figure it out. College sports is very complicated. It always has been from the beginning, and I don't think there's a way you could set up one person to be in charge of one thing and get everybody to agree for that to happen.
Fine, I'll do it. Let's talk about how many games you really think are going to be played, because I think it's great that they're pushing forward, trying to play 10+1 or whatever, right? When all's said and done, we don't know if we're going to have a Miami Marlins situation, right? Where, this team can't play or this team can't play suddenly. So how many games do you think we're going to actually get in on average?
Man, I have no idea. I'm 50-50 at best that we even get to the season, because you still have to have all the students come back to campus. And that's going to create there are going to be outbreaks on certain campuses. Do those outbreaks reach the football teams? Is the NCAA going to cancel D3 and D2 next week, or what about FCS? And does FBS go forward? Can a conference, if one or two teams has an outbreak and they have to shut it down, will the conference move forward without them? These contingency plans need to be developed. Clearly, MLB did not have one. They were figuring out the Marlins situation on the fly. In baseball in Korea, when a team had an outbreak, basically things shut down for a few weeks and then they would come back. It's harder to do that in football when you have limited games. So I honestly have no idea. Like I said, I'm 50-50 we even get start of the season, because there's going to be thousands and thousands of students coming to college campuses, and everybody knows how college students typically act. And is that going to be a safe environment in terms of keeping people from getting the virus? I could not give you a game. I just know that if we start and we get 2 or 3 games in and then they feel like they have to shut down, that may be the worst situation of all the possibilities.
Chris, great to catch up with you, man. We appreciate the insights. Enjoy your writing and your material. For those that haven't experienced it, how can they find what you do?
Yeah, just theathletic.com. We have a 40% off deal going on right now. Just click on any story and you get a discounted subscription. We got a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of college football news going on, so just check us out there.
I can't wait to read about actual football games that you're reporting on. Only positive vibes here, Chris.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, man.